Thank you, Bruce. We recognize that one. Good morning. Welcome to the Treasure Coast Unitarian Congregation of Stuart, Florida. Today is January 17th, 2021. My name is Janet Groat, and I'll be your worship associate today. We're happy to have Rev Ranwa Hammamy in our pulpit today. Rev Ranwa serves as the executive director of the Unitarian Universalist Church, Justice Ministry of California, which supports UUs around the state of California in various ministries, providing advocacy, education, and witness opportunities for our congregations to live out UU values. Ranwa has previously served as president of DRUUMM, which is Diverse and Revolutionary UU's Multicultural Ministries. It's a national organization for UU people of color. She is a self-described UU Muslim. Ranwa seeks to serve both the living traditions in her ministry by encouraging others to grow and learn from each other's gifts. When not working, she enjoys spending time baking absurd concoctions, singing for liberation, and relaxing with her spouse and 5 fur babies. See Ranwa, she's here, there she is. Hi. And we want to extend a big thanks to those who help with the service today, Corina Pelloni and Bruce Ruby. We're a welcoming congregation. We welcome people of all gender identities, races, ages, and backgrounds. Thank you for being with us today. We're holding Zoom services every Sunday at 11 a.m. to be put on our email list, or to find out more information about us, go to our website, tcuuc.org. And you'll get on our mailing list, you'll get the link for the live service each week. You'll get a follow-up from the service midweek from Corina, so you'll know what was in there. And then our Friday update will appear as well. Light the chalice. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose, to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice, knowing our congregation as a church dispersed across communities, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life. Ooh. This reading is by the Reverend Teresa Soto. In this community, we hold hope close. We don't always know what comes next, but that cannot dissuade us. We don't always know what to do, but that will not mean that we are lost in the wilderness. We rely on the certainty beneath, the foundation of our values and our ethics. We are people who return to love like the North Star, and to truth that we are greater together than we are alone. Our hope does not live in some glimmer in the indistant future. Rather, we know the way to the world of which we dream by covenant and by the movement forward of one right action and the next we know that the day we will arrive at home. Now, Bruce is going to sing. Come sing a song with me. That's number 346. Sing to your heart's content, but remain muted. Let us, as usual, recite our affirmation, speaking the first verse and singing the second. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Here is Reverend Hammamy to give us a story for all ages.
Good morning. It's lovely to see your faces this morning. And for our time for all ages, we're going to participate in a shared activity. So one of my favorite organizers, writers, creators is Adrienne Murray Brown, and I'll talk a little bit more about her in the sermon later this morning. But she said something in one of her writings: with love at the center, there is always room. And she offers that as a way for us to begin to imagine a world with love at the center. So as we think about a world with love at the center, there is always room. What is there room for? When you imagine a world with love at the center, what do you see created in that world? What do you see as a world with love at the center? What is there room for? What is the imagining that you have? And to help us start thinking about that, I'm going to share an image with you that another congregation started, and you're going to build on them, build on what they've started. So we're going to do this. And this is from a congregation in Texas. So this is really going to be all over the place. I think y'all see a word cloud? See a picture of the earth here? So for folks who don't know what a word cloud is, it's what you see in front of you. It is an image that is created by a series of words that you are going to help come up with some of these. And so I'm going to open up my chat, make sure I can see what y'all are sharing. And you can also unmute yourself to share something in case my chat decides not to show up, because apparently it doesn't want to. Gotcha. All right. I see one answer already. Perfect. Karen Frank is typing joy. So that is something that you see in a world with love at the center. What else do you see? And it could be something as broad as joy. Dana adds nature, compassion, and it could be something specific too. You know, every kid has a lunch at school. I'm going to add that one. So what do you see in a world with love at the center? No fear. Responsibility. Harmony. Acceptance. Needs fulfilled. Peace. Connection, listening. I'm going to add accessibility, sharing, get a couple more in there. Hope, forgiveness, I see love is off by the wayside, which could be a social comment right now, but I see peace right there in the middle. That's fair. Well, this word cloud will shift each other. We'll shift around as we add more things. Yeah, knowing each other. Janet, I know the LOL is there, but I'm going to put laughter in there because I feel like that's a world with love at the center. Sustainable agriculture. All right, give me a couple more. Nothing? What do you, when you think about a world where there's love, equality across continents? Just going to get that last one in. Peace of mind. Control climate change. Health. All right, so you ready to see what this world looks like? And just like in our lives, it takes some time to build that world and to create that world. And what's lovely is that there are no limits to the world that we can imagine. There really, when we're imagining a world with love at the center, there is always room. And so when we're imagining this world with love at the center, with all of these incredible things that you have imagined in this world, let's see what it looks like together. And there you go. That is your world with love at the center. You and, I believe, the San Marcos Church in Texas. So there you go. You've collaborated with a congregation out in Texas to create this world.
Thank you. That was fun. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. Bruce is going to give us a bit of music to get us moving specifically towards our checkbooks. Normally, those of us who pledge drop a few extra bucks into the collection plate each Sunday. And of course, our monthly or quarterly checks go in there too, if not directly from the bank. But you know, that's just not working real well with Zoom. So there's many of you that have not made a financial commitment to the church. And many of you are very generous. But let's take this time to go ahead and see if we can make this work. You can send your contributions. We're going to share a link here. We are so grateful for this offering and commit together that the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and the world, much more than they would do just for ourselves alone. May this offering sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and hope. Now we're going to share our joys and sorrows. I'll move a stone in our symbolic river to mark each joy and sorrow. Please keep your joys and sorrows brief. Raise your hand to share and we will unmute you and call on you. For those whose joys or sorrows are too personal to share, know that we send our good vibrations. Now we're going to have our pastoral reading and a meditation after that.
Thank you. Will you join me in the spirit of meditation, reflection, and deep ask that some call prayer? This is the moment. Put down what you're holding. Everything is changing. Listen to the wind. And when you hear it, you don't have to fear it. Now's the time for healing everything we love. Gracious and loving source of life, source of mystery, source of love. In this time when there is still so much that is so very wrong, we ask that you remind us of our power to create what is right and good. In this time when we can feel helpless and angry, when we are reminded of the injustices in our own lives and the lives of those around us, help us to remember that the flow of this world, the flow of this life, the flow of love is moving us towards a more just and compassionate world that is possible. Whether we are holding sorrows or joys that are personal in our hearts this morning, help us to remember that we are not alone in carrying those. That even though we are separate in physical spaces, that in our hearts and in our spirits, we are held. We are held by community. We are held by something we can't name sometimes. We are held by you, source of love and life. In this moment, help us to remember that we are that world with love at the center, and that we are a part of creating it. I invite you all now to hold that love at your center in a moment of silent meditation.
In the Come to me, come to me.
And now we're going to go to our sermon. Here is Reverend Ranwa Hammamy.
Thank you again. Before I offer my words, I would like to share the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King from his letter from a Birmingham jail, which is a letter addressing clergy who were critical of the use of direct action in the South. You may well ask, why direct action? Why sit-ins, marches, and so forth? Isn't negotiation a better path? You are quite right in calling for negotiation. Indeed, this is the very purpose of direct action. Nonviolent direct action seeks to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community which has constantly refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. It seeks so to dramatize the issue that it can no longer be ignored. My citing the creation of tension as part of the work of the nonviolent resistor may sound rather shocking, but I must confess that I am not afraid of the word tension. I have earnestly opposed violent tension, but there is a type of constructive, nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. Just as Socrates felt that it was necessary to create a tension in the mind so that individuals could rise from the bondage of myths and half-truths to the unfettered realm of creative analysis and objective appraisal, so must we see the need for nonviolent direct action to create the kind of tension in society that will help men rise from the dark depths of prejudice and racism to the majestic heights of understanding and brotherhood. The purpose of our direct action program is to create a situation so crisis-packed that it will inevitably open the door to negotiation. I therefore concur with you in your call for negotiation. Too long has our beloved Southland been bogged down in a tragic effort to live in monologue rather than dialogue. This excerpt from Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, it reminds me of one of the most powerful actions that I have ever had the opportunity to participate in this day, up to this day. About 2.5 years ago, when in San Diego, there was an action called Free Our Future. And here in California, what was happening at that time was the bringing in of something called Operation Streamline. And Operation Streamline is an inhumane deportation process that literally criminalizes migration. Under Operation Streamline, rather than process immigration cases of any undocumented migrants crossing the southern border in civil immigration systems, as was customary, with Operation Streamline, certain areas now prosecuted those same cases through federal criminal justice systems. And in many of those cases, hearings and sentencings occurred en masse, with dozens of undocumented immigrants being present for a single court session at a time. So not only does this Operation Streamline rob migrants of their basic legal rights of due process, it also fails to provide adequate or, in some cases, any legal representation, and ignores legitimate cases for asylum. It denies the basic humanity and dignity of the immigrants and migrants it detains and deports. And so this action in July of 2018 was to keep Operation Streamline from happening in California. And it was held on the first day that some of those en masse trials were to begin. And so I had the opportunity to participate in multiple pieces of that action. And the first part of that was to literally interrupt cases at the federal courts. And so a group of us stealthily, safely entered the federal court system, as was our legal right, to go and observe one of these en masse court cases. And we strategically sat in different parts of the audience section of that courtroom. And we saw the first group of over a dozen immigrants brought in, sentenced en masse to receive or processed en masse, and were given an arbitrary bail number. And we saw that happen with that first group. Then the second group came in, another dozen or so immigrants brought in. And the first of us rose up and claimed, "This is an illegitimate proceeding," and began to interrupt the court proceeding nonviolently, disrupting what was a harmful process in this system. My colleague in ministry, who was that first person, was escorted out of the room, and the proceeding continued. A few minutes later, another one of us rose up and said, "This is an illegitimate proceeding," and continued on. And we did this for about 5 or 6 of us, every few minutes rising up to interrupt this illegitimate, harmful proceeding that was dehumanizing immigrants and migrants here in California. In that time, we watched dozens of immigrants being processed at once, and it was such a horrendous miscarriage of justice. There was arbitrary bail setting, as if those individuals had the money to access that bail. We saw what we were fighting against in that moment, and we were disgusted and horrified at the immorality of what we were witnessing. By some miracle, none of us were arrested in that moment. We were all escorted. And we were able to join up with others at a later action. And in that action, multiple groups were barricading the doors of federal buildings with our bodies. We were blocking those doors to show that we were disrupting the status quo that had caused harm to immigrants and migrants. And as we were standing there or sitting there blocking those doors, there was a march of thousands of people from across the country coming in with music, with art, with children dancing with monarch butterfly wings attached to them. There was beauty, there was joy, there was community. There was multilingual singing at once. In that moment, I saw such beauty and such joy. I saw a community that fiercely loved, created, welcomed, endured, and celebrated. In that moment, I saw a community, a world that I was fighting for. And so these days, I remember the courtroom and the process that I observed there. But the scene that was most etched on my heart was the celebration and the joy of that powerful community in the streets, singing, dancing, imagining together. In that courtroom, I could see the world that I was fighting against. But in the streets, I could see and participate in the world that I was fighting for. And so these days, it's incredibly easy to know and to name what we are fighting against. We know, we've seen it on the news, we see it in our lives. The desecration of sacred lands and the commodification of the earth. A capitalistic economic structure that rewards the wealthy and punishes the poor and makes it impossible to get a life-saving vaccine. The erosion of an already incomplete democracy by fascist ideologies at the highest level of government. A rise in the visibility and mainstreaming of white supremacy. There is plenty for us to fight against. And so much of it is connected, so much of it causes fear, despair, grief, anger. And those experiences are very real and very valid, and can sometimes feel like the only things we have. And those feelings, those experiences, they do mobilize us. We've seen it. January 6th, when we witnessed those riots in the Capitol, we saw how that fear and that anger mobilized, finally, some folks to take action, to challenge those systems that had allowed such violence to occur. And so those things do mobilize us. But to what end? We know what we are fighting against. But what is it we are fighting for? What is that world that we want to create? So in our work at the UU Justice Ministry of California, that's a question we come back to over and over again in our trainings, in our actions, in our worship spaces. What is it you imagine when you imagine a world with love at the center? A world that's not defined solely by what isn't there, but primarily focused on what is there. A world that is shaped and concretely defined by the positives that reflect our deepest yearnings, our holiest dreams. And it can get down into those seemingly insignificant details like watching your children or grandchildren dancing barefoot in the backyard, or the broadest and boldest systemic change like a truly liberated understanding of gender, where the legal and societal norm is to wait until children or adults decide who they are and tell us before we document it, and then still allow that to be as malleable as imaginable. When was the last time you imagined that world? Really imagined it. Immersed your heart, your body, your spirit, your mind in that world. What would it be like to do that every day? I mentioned earlier Adrienne Murray Brown, who is a Black, biracial, queer, fat survivor, a witch, a movement facilitator, a mediator. She is a doula, an artist, a writer, a podcaster, a teacher, an Octavia Butler scholar, an activist living in Detroit. And her writings lift up the generative and the creative, the expansion of our possibilities and imagination. And one of her writings is this, Emergent Strategy, Shaping Change and Changing Worlds. And this is a book that has resonated with movement spaces and liberation dreamers since it came out in 2017. And it is one of the sacred texts that I return to again and again. In an Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Murray Brown draws on science, organizing, and science fiction to invite us to lean into the complexities of change and learn from them and create with them in our effort to transform the world. In weaving together these elements to generate this fluid essence of what she calls emergent strategy, Brown describes social justice and transformation work as science-fictional behavior, as it is about, quote, being concerned with the way our actions and beliefs now, today, will shape the future, tomorrow, and the next generations. As science-fictional work, justice and transformation is also faithful work, because it necessitates us rooting ourselves in a vision of what the world could be. What in our most universalist understanding of the world would be if all of us lived whole and liberated lives in right relationship with each other and this precious planet that supports our being. And to do that, to take on the responsibility of shaping a new worldview, Adrienne Maree Brown reminds us that we need to expand our imagination, because we are in the middle of an imagination battle, she writes, living now inside the imagination of people who thought economic disparity and environmental destruction were acceptable costs for their power. It is our right and responsibility, she says, to write ourselves into the future. And so recalling that day in San Diego, when we were interrupting this process of Operation Streamline, it would limit my imagination to focus only on what I was fighting against in that courtroom that day. We spent so much of our time letting ourselves be confined to the visions with their roots in violence, competition, dehumanization, and entitlement, rather than expanding ourselves and each other with a worldview that is innate to our very being. We don't spend enough time with our imagination. So what is the world we want to create? What is the world that seems so far away and yet possible? That world centered on that which we value. And tomorrow, many of us will be celebrating Martin Luther King Jr., honoring a prophet whose legacy and work was rooted in a faithful imagination of a world that is possible. And the easy answer to his imaginations would be quoting his "I Have a Dream" speech. But that's not bold enough. That's not the entirety of who Martin Luther King was and is to us today. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, he is critical of the white moderates who have condemned the use of nonviolent direct action and have said, give it time to Black Americans. He is critical of people whose imaginations of the possibilities in our world and the actions to get us there were limited by the world as it is and not imagining the world as it could be. One of my other favorite excerpts from this letter, Dr. King says this: "More and more, I feel that the people of ill will have used time much more effectively than have the people of goodwill. We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the hateful words and actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence of the good people. Human progress never rolls in on wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts of men willing to be co-workers with God. And without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the forces of social stagnation. We must use time creatively, in the knowledge that the time is always ripe to do right. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy and transform our pending national elegy into a creative psalm of brotherhood. Now is the time to lift our national policy from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of human dignity." I don't know about y'all, but he could have been writing that yesterday. In his letter, Dr. King is challenging us to imagine a new way to use our power as people of faith, as people of goodwill, as those good people he writes about. We have that power in our hands, and he is inviting us to break outside those constraints of wait, of be patient, to listen to another perspective that says, we've been patient for centuries and generations. We're ready for this new way now. He reminds us that our patience, our call to patience, is what has led, frankly, to these riots. It has led us to an administration and systems that are so steeped in white supremacy and fascist ideologies that we may wonder how we got here. But the answer is, it's clear. And Dr. King is inviting us to imagine new ways of cultivating our power, new ways to imagine the world, new ways of creating that world, listening to those who have been trying to change it from the margins. And he's inviting us to imagine that world with the joy, the dance, the celebration, the music, the laughter, the diverse community and language mingling that I saw in those streets in San Diego 2 years ago. Before he could carry it through, Dr. King was assassinated, but he had an imagination of this Poor People's Campaign that has been revived in recent years. An imagination that people have been building into reality by generating organizing and truly interconnected community and liberation, a truly interdependent, interconnected understanding of a just world. In his letter from a Birmingham jail, King writes, "We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny." And that is a line many of us know because he uses it in a lot of his sermons. And when you got a line like that, you use it over and over again. He invites us to imagine that destiny and how that network of mutuality looks like when we are all revered, respected, and loved. And so today, I want to remind you that spending time with our imagination is not a denial of our struggles, but it helps us root ourselves in what is possible so that we can more firmly, collectively, resiliently, humbly, and faithfully engage the fullness of ourselves in our world. Spending time with our imagination is not a denial of the inevitability of harm, mistakes, or conflict, some of which I will name has happened in this sermon, but expands our visions of how we can collectively hold ourselves accountable and heal through those moments when we will stray from our capacity for good. The faithful work of Unitarian Universalists includes responding to the injustices of our current reality while centered on a worldview with love at its center, where there is always room. The faithful work of Unitarian Universalism includes dismantling, disrupting oppressive systems, guided by the imagination and creation of liberatory communities and practices that truly value the inherent worth and dignity of every person, that embody justice, equity, and compassion in our relations, that respect and revere the interdependent web of life and existence of which we are a tiny but influential part. So in this imagination battle that Brown reminds us we are in this call to create love and to cultivate liberation, where would you start? Where have you already started? Where have your neighbors, community organizers, your own state action network? I think Florida has a state action network. Where have you begun to imagine a world with love at the center? Where have you not only started to dismantle the old, but build something new, something unimaginable? As we move into this new year, into a new administration at the national level, we have an opportunity to begin anew in every moment. We have an opportunity to build into our lives practices and commitments that help us return to our imagination, to remember the good in ourselves and our world, and to recenter love. Because there is a wondrous world being created if we are willing to open ourselves up to it, and to remember that a world centered on love is a world where anything is possible. And in that spirit, I invite you to join us in our closing hymn, Love Will Guide Us, number 131.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Thank you. So as we move forward into our world, a world where anything is possible, may we imagine the spaciousness that love creates. May we imagine the liberation that love creates. And may we imagine our capacity to make it so.
Postlude is entitled, I'm Gonna Sing When the Spirit Says Sing.
Thank you, Bruce.